Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. I am Kristen Foster with Get Loud Arkansas, here with our favorite state senator, Joyce Elliott, and executive director of Get Loud Arkansas, to talk about the first week of legislative session.
Oh, let's talk.
Let's do it. I know, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So we are calling these weekly live streams Speak Truth to Power with Joyce Elliott, because we know that you have a long-standing history of speaking truth to power and leading Arkansas on a lot of important issues. And now, for the first time in 20 years, legislative session started and you're not there.
And I'm not there.
How are you feeling?
Oh, I feel really good about it. But of course, there's a little tinge of, I'm not there. But it's not a big problem because I loved doing the work and talking to people for those 20 years. And that was such a privilege. But I think I don't miss it because I'm so involved in what I'm doing now, the civic engagement work with Get Loud Arkansas. Were I not fortunate enough to have that involvement with you and so many other people who are part of our group, I'm sure I would miss it greatly. But please know I'm paying attention. Very, very much so.
I don't think anybody doubts that. I am, and I know you're really focused now on civic engagement and voter registration in Arkansas, making sure everyone can have their voice heard at the ballot box. But we talk a lot also about that, this work doesn't end on election day; it continues, and I think that we would miss an opportunity if we didn't talk about education a little bit, because you have been the champion for public education in Arkansas for a long time. We're an educator, and we now have a new governor, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who has called herself the education governor. So what do you think about all of that? Just as Joyce Elliott, not as Get Loud Arkansas, but just as Joyce Elliott, what do you think of all of this rhetoric around education?
What Joyce Elliott thinks is, I wish that every other governor who said that he, fortunately now we can say she, I guess, but was going to be the education governor, and that's never really happened. Because what we have done from time to time is address crises rather than building an educational system that is truly world class. And seems as if we've started off on the same track of, I'm going to be the education governor, but we're doing all these disparate, in this case, executive orders, and that's her right to do that. But I've always wanted some governor not just to say I'm the education governor and not follow through on understanding we need to build a great educational system where everything is not expected to happen at the school site. What happens with the kid's life, the quality of life before arriving there is really, really important. So we need a governor and legislators and everybody else who will put together the quality of life that a child has way before they arrive at the school, and then have a great system built on high standards and teachers who are well prepared, and making sure every child, no matter where they live. I'm so tired of this talk about they're in some zip code and therefore they shouldn't be trapped in that zip code. There should not be such a thing as a zip code that traps anybody to do anything. So this happy talk about it's about the zip code. No, it's about the quality of life everywhere, so that no zip code has a school in it that's not a school that is one of choice. That's what, in my estimation, in the studying I've done about world-class schools, that's the kind of thing a governor would be doing along with legislators. And by the way, I have tried to get folks to do this the time I was in the legislature, and everybody was so much more interested in chasing silver bullets, and that's where we are now.
So folks who, had turned into a very contentious issue around education, and folks who disagree with you might say, well, you were there for 20 years. Like, why isn't it fixed already?
Right.
What do you say to that?
What I say to that is I spent that time studying world-class schools across the country with the National Conference of State Legislators, and I did this with Democrats and Republicans, equal number, and know what it looks like. I came back and presented it to the legislature. There was no interest. I presented it to the state State Board of Education, there was no interest. So I haven't gotten people to catch on to, we know what's happening in other countries where people have very high performing students. And we just will not decide. And I've often asked this in our education committee meetings, or requested it, we need to find the North Star. What kind of schools do, and let's build toward that, because that's what these other countries with very high performing students did. They set out a pathway and made sure everybody stayed on that pathway, not one of these things where every time you get a bright idea. The other thing I've done, I was the person who introduced the science of reading to the legislature, a bill in 2017. So I passed that bill on the science of reading because I knew there was a problem. And there were kids with dyslexia that's reading, whose needs were not being addressed. So I got a bill passed to address that. But at the same time, I was trying to get people to, let's think about this as a whole thing. Mm-hmm. So every child can be prepared for the world of work at that time, or go to college, or do what they want to as an entrepreneur to pursue their dreams. It's not one thing or the other. It's like your body was built from all your parts. We didn't just go like, oh, I think I'll take an arm and stick it over here. It was well thought out, and that's what I wish we would do. And I was a teacher for 30 years. I spent my time as a teacher for 30 years trying to make sure every student, I don't think there's any student you can talk to that I taught in 30 years, and that's a lot of them. They know I ask the best of them and the most of them, but I also ask it of me, and that was my responsibility. So I'm not saying I've done any more than other people, but I have studied what it means to have world-class schools, and I have been able in my classroom, because I have studied it. I mean, I knew what to do to make sure standards were rigorous. I had students who wanted to get out of my AP class to go take my regular class because they said it was too hard. And then I made certain right away that they got in my class, my regular classes, so you still had to work to learn. That's what it should be like, and teachers should be respected. And these other countries, they call teachers nation builders. Mm-hmm. And it's what we learned about in so many of these places. To be a teacher meant that you were the top of the food chain. And if you couldn't be a teacher, maybe you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or something. That's the way,
yeah,
especially in Finland. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this is not the last we are going to talk about education during this legislative session, but I did just want to touch on it briefly because I know you're so passionate about it. And we're going to be spending a lot more time also talking about voting and election laws and things like that. But help folks understand, what Get Loud Arkansas is going to be about as we move into this legislative session, how we're going to help folks get engaged.
Yeah, I think as we were just talking about education, what people need to understand, and most people do, everything that happens in education is tied to a vote someplace. And so Get Loud Arkansas wants to make sure that the voices of all Arkansans are heard, no matter what the issue is. But what we'll be doing is filling the gap between saying every voice should be heard, do the work in between that statement and the ballot box. Mm-hmm. So Get Loud will be helping people understand what's going on at the legislature, how the process works, what they can do to be involved in it. You don't have to be here at the Capitol. There are other ways you can write letters, you can call, or you can especially use social media. And we will be getting around the state because we're going to be working all year long. We've already started this process. Going to where people are to teach them about that process and what they can do. And everything is important at the legislature, but some of those same types of things are going on at their local level, and teaching them how to be a part of the process and not to be afraid of the process. And just don't be intimidated. It's their right. So Get Loud Arkansas wants to equip everybody so that they can have their voices heard. They will be educated about how to go about it, mobilized all the way to that poll. And when you get there, you know what to do because you thought it through and you prepared yourself to cast that ballot and feel good about it.
Well, I am very excited about the work. Very excited about your leadership as we move forward with it. I hope folks will check back with us every week or use our social media as a resource. We will be back next week with a live stream. We're going to try to do these on Thursdays. Please share this with your friends. Help us get the word out.
Yeah.
And we will be back to speak more truth to power next week. Hopefully with as chill of a week in the legislature as we've had this week. Hopefully not any more excitement.
We're looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much.